afternoon. Welcome to this very unique event at the Center for Contemporary Studies. It's called Critical Science in Bloom, and it is going to be conducted by the German Artistic Philosophical Research Group, which consists of Professor Daniel Felsner, Dr. Martin Dornberg, Adrian Swartz, Joshua Kruger, Ephraim Wegner, and Dr. Vasanti Das. We hope you'll have a very pleasant experience here. Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for welcoming, and thank you very much to Raghavendra Gadakar to have us as a guest artist here. So we've been playing here a group of 5 + 1 people, 5 people from Germany and Vasanti from India for 2 weeks now, and doing some research about what is considered the critical zone in geoscience and in biology. And before I talk about that, let me just briefly introduce you what is expecting to you. All of you got the program, so we are now at the 4th part, Impressions 1, that we are going to explain something about our approach methodologically and about our artistic research, as we call it. So it's a kind of a research that brings art, technology, and science together, which tries to build bridges among these very different disciplines. So Martin Dornberg, who is a medical doctor and a psychosomatist and a philosopher at Freiburg University, and me, Daniel Felsner, we are collaborating since 10 years now, founded that group of artistic research, which is called Embody in Freiburg. And we do different projects. As you can see here, we call it parasitic ecologies. We did some Skype performances, intercorporal splits, which is published 2010 to 14 with improvisational artists, scientists, sociologists. So it's an interdisciplinary approach. And in 2014, we've been already invited by Professor Gadakar in order to do artistic research about the human-animal relationship here at CCS IISc. And we presented that briefly after the stay. As we do it today, we consider this as a workshop, as a first presentation of first working results. So all the material that we collected within the last 2 weeks, we're going to work with in the next year, maybe 2 years, and it will be shown in an exhibition in 2020 in Germany. But before I get into details, so this is just a look back, 4 years back, to our first stay here at IISc, a project which was called US, about the human-animal relationship. And since we are interdisciplinary working philosophers, media artists, improvisational musicians, dancers, sociologists, people from anthropology, we take a theoretical guideline. In this case, it was Michel Serres, the parasite, which guided us through the labs with the old Vespiri and new Vespiri of Professor Gadakar. And we did some what we call artistic interventions. So we were working with bamboo sticks, in order to intervene into the regular rhythm of scientific work. So artists, in a way, came in and parasited the work of the science which was going on here. So I will briefly show that later. You can see all the working results which have been done within the last 2 years in an interactive web documentary. After that, in 2016, we dealt with the Anthropocene, which is, of course, one of the challenges that we face today. And that was a project which was done in the Garbage City in Cairo. And that is as well documented in the web. From the philosophical point of view, we dealt with the object-oriented ontology, how it is called, or new materialism. One protagonist that was part of our research is Graham Harman, an American philosopher who was teaching in Cairo for 15 years and who is now at SciArc in Los Angeles. So the first theoretical thing was Parasite, Michel Serres, then New Materialism, and Graham Harman. Now, we call this project Deglobalize, which consists of 3 sub-projects, and one is playing here in India at the IISc. As you can see, we call it Scientific Forest or Forests. The stay that we did here now, we will be in Egypt again and having a look at the critical zone in the Nile Delta. And in 2019, we will have a closer look on the Black Forest in Germany. And all the work results, so this triangulation of critical zones will be put together and merged together in an exhibition in Germany. Now, what have we done within the last 2 weeks? We went, of course, to the Inno-French cell at IISc, led by Professor Shekar, and did interviews with people. So one guy of the Indian French cell, and French cell is here, Patrick Chouquet, Pascal Chouquet, sorry. The French names, you know. So Pascal is here, great to have you with us. The others are unfortunately busy. This is Laurent, who showed us his instruments and talking about his approach. He's also familiar with Latourian philosophy, that is one of our present guidelines. And here Pascal doing works on, from an ecological point of view, you're focusing on termites and what they can contribute to what we consider as a critical zone and water management and so on. And so this is one of your colleagues. We went with Shenyu to the Critical Zone Observatory last week for our drive, and we're looking at the implementations and the water management, the problem which occurs through climate change in that area. And we call it forests, since the Indian Institute of Science is located in a rainforest in a way. And so this is the department of Bangalore. And Nikita Zakaria was showing us her research on termite molds, which can be also considered as part of the critical zone discourse. Also, when we had some doubts about this approach, but we interviewed her, and that will be part of the interactive documentation, so she showed for herself. Now, this is part of the research by Nikita, and as you can see here, there are 2 types of termites that we got to know. The ones who, they are called minor and major termites. And we didn't want to consider you as major or minor, so we said the dark and the bright termites.
Worker termites.
Worker termites. And the brighter ones are sitting at the tables, round tables, who brought some animals with you, and or some objects, and the darker ones are sitting around. So they perform in filling up a hole and doing repair on the termite molds. Okay, so let's also look at Satai Sheets work. Sorry, it's looking at thick wasps and nematodes, which get on that. Just a few pictures. And Sudip, who is here, where is he? Great. Helped us, also Funana, and all the colleagues here from CCS, in order to transform wasps from their natural natural habitat in a way, natural, whatever that means nowadays, nature, you know, it's a negotiated term, from an air-conditioned box out in the box that you see here. So we've got the wasps, we transferred them or dislocated them within the last 2 days or 3 days to this box, and there is a live cam which is grabbing some signals. So you see the live image here of the wasps, and they are part of the music that you hear in between. So we've got intermissions with music, and that is a signal flow. The patterns of the wasp are one parameter within that musical interpretation done by Efraim Wegner, who's also part of our research group. And maybe this is the question to also introduce Vasant Das, who is a researcher at IISc School of Art, Design and Technology, who again participated in our research as 4 years ago in BUS, and we've been teaching together 6 years ago already at IISc School. And 2 of our students are here, Joshua, who is filming, and Adrian, who is at the entrance. And they will also show, they did some research about critical zone that they found here, and so their first work results will be shown as well. Okay, so here you see the wasps in the transformation phase when they were dislocated here, so we had to cover them, or Unana and Sulik did, to make them feel comfortable, and now in a way they arrived, and this is one picture of how to feed them, how to make them comfortable, how to also make them part of science, since they get a color mark and a clear ID in order to observe them. Stefan, who is also part of the Indo-French cell, unfortunately can't be with us today since he has a computer problem and has to go to a conference tomorrow. He showed us his work that he's doing on the critical zone. He's using Google Earth, and he's choosing rivers in the Congo Basin, for instance, that you see on the left side. So he's doing haute couture, as he said, drawing the rivers by hand, and the green lines, these 3 crossings, as you can see, they are satellites who come and cross these critical zones of the river so that he can use the data in order to interpret the development of water. And I just put our image on the right because we transferred this kind of a concept artistically by taking the data that was delivered.
Hello. Okay, we continue with our program, and we will have 3 table talks. Yes, maximum 7 minutes. We asked you to bring some object or animal or something which matters for you, and we try to have some encounters about these objects. Okay, 7 minutes is not so much. But we try to share some impression. Why is this object or animal important for me? Or why is it important for our research group, or for India, or for the geopolitics? Yes. And the objects are from very small to a large scale, as all critical film do. Yes, and we try to have some encounters. Yes. Could you first start? Yes, I start here. Yes, okay, is that okay? Can I start with you?
You say a little bit about the object and what is for you some matters of concern, some matters of care. Why is it important for science, for a living society, perhaps? And perhaps you can share and you ask, you interact. Yes, okay. We tried.
All right.
So if you hold it on your heel,
Yes, like this.
like this.
All right. Here, as our scientific object, we have a colony of ants. The species is Dichoma indicum, and these ants are found in southern India, including our campus and throughout the Western Ghats. This is comparatively a small group of animal. The colony size is lesser than the typical several other species of ants. Here we have around 100 of ants, and we wanted to know what in a society of ants, what it individual does, as well as what as a group the colony behaves. Since all the ants they look together, we marked those ants on their body with unique colored dots, and we keep them in our laboratory condition almost in a temperature and humidity which they maintain within their nest underground. Here now we can see that they are coming out of their nest because now we have removed this cover that which gives a kind of a darkness within their nest. If we remove it, they feel exposed, then they start coming out of the nest.
Okay,
Within
just sorry that I intervene, but I would like that you give the microphone in a round,
all right.
and that the other say a little bit about their object and what is perhaps some relation to the other object. Yes, we,
all right.
that's
Maybe
I thought I have to speak for 7 minutes.
no. So it's real. Okay.
So I actually got a flower because that's really important to me, flowers and plants. And I'm assuming that's very important for all of us living things. And I actually see a very nice connection between the ants and the flowers, because ants probably can also be used as pollinators, as probably could the bees and the wasps be used. So I really feel that that we all really need to work on preserving not just ourselves. We can't preserve ourselves unless we preserve the flowers and the ants and the wasps and all the flora and fauna around us. Thank you.
I have some dead ants from the same species. I have removed these, but the thing is that when ants die in a colony, their fellow other members of the colony, they remove them because of the fear of the fungal infections that the other colony members might have from them. So it's a very kind of a very interesting process to see that how the fellow members of the same colony remove their dead colleagues.
Okay, I didn't bring anything because I prefer to keep them alive. I'm working on termites and I prefer them alive in their nest, quietly in their field, than dead in a box or somewhere else. I'm coming back to the usefulness of everything, the flower, the ants, and anything. And I especially like the sentence, how can the against change into a for or a with? There is a problem with termites that all the farmers and everybody looks like a pest and see them mainly through their negative impact on the crops and the environment and so on. And like any against, there is a for and there is a with. And in many situations, people are used to work with them and use them for improving the ecosystem or some ecological functions. And studying termites, but I could study flowers. Oh, you broke termites, but dead. So I don't want them. And no, just a joke. And okay, so I'm working on the ecological functions of organisms, and it can be termites, ants, flowers, anything. And yeah.
Okay, so try now to relate this to the other objects. If you find something similar or different, helpful or dangerous or something. Oh, yeah,
I didn't understand.
A short second round about how you relate
to the other.
To the other. Pascal
Or
already
what to
did
the other
somehow
people
with
who have
flower.
said something before.
If there is something,
With the-
you don't have to.
Well, of course, I can relate termites very well with ants. Both are social insects, of course, from different groups, and they share common ecological space, and they interact with each other in several aspects. Not always friendly behavior, but sometimes fearful. And I can see, of course, a relation with flowers as well. As she said, that not necessarily all the time they pollinate, but ants are really necessary and interacting most of the time with plants. So that's how I would relate plants and termite with ants.
So I of course I made a statement that everything is necessary, but going back, I can actually see a viewpoint from the farmers or from the people who build houses that termites can be very harmful to them, and it's very difficult for humans to put a different perspective and see it from the other side when they're not getting benefited. So probably somebody like you needs to bring up the advantages of having termites in our natural ecology, and teaching people about that.
They are intervened, so you said what also no afterwards. Okay.
So we intervene. Intervention in this meaning will not mean that we want to interrupt you. But it is a critical intervention because all these discourses, all these questions cannot stop at once. Yes? They will go on. You have it with your colleagues, you have it in your team. Yes? And so we now perform this stopping of the discourse and the going on of the discourse. Yes? So it's a little bit the artistic or philosophical question. So we do not want to be impolite now when we go on with the program, but some questions are raised, yes, and the discussion have to go on. And science, of course, has to go on, and all the countries, India, France, Germany, UK, US, and so on. Okay, so we stop this part and we go to the next part. Thank you very much.
There's one.
Just stop a moment.
so for a final statement. We go on with a reading by Vasanti. About the critical zone. Please.
Fragments. The great murders, destructions have become the quiet game of the well-behaved. This is by Michel Foucault. Reflections on critical zone. Why is this term, which is always already used elsewhere, deployed again in his essay titled Some Advantages of Critical Zone in Geopolitics by Bruno Latour? The scientists seem not very interested in this term, since they have used them amply. They were not giving it the same profuse attention we in the humanities, social sciences, and artists are compelled to give. At any rate, as the title suggests, it is very specifically for geopolitics, that perhaps ignores the prefix geo and its complexities, more or less, in favor of politics, the field they are entrenched in. Without instantiation of meaning by the sign, there remains only the fanaticism of language. The fanaticism, Rafael Sanchez Ferlosio defines as an absolutist inflammation of the signifier, Jean Baudrillard. This is in response to ourselves, the team here, for the performing team. Latour is addressing several critical sense and senses of the word critical and zone. The scientists, among other things, describe the well-known interdisciplinary method as a critical role in their work. Indeed, it was fantastic to hear that the algae can be a stakeholder. Laurent Ruiz from the Indo-French said. Geopolitics, even if it is interdisciplinary, is required here to intensify its own process with further inclusion of scientists to get a broader, deeper understanding of the materiality of the Earth crust, the zone from this context, and therefore the political is one of the several players. The zone is not land, property, or territory, but deterritorialized into zone and zoning. Yet, why is Latour repeating himself, or is this a repetition with difference? Deleuze, or difference, Jacques Derrida. A game played by critical theory since the 1960s, particularly, to perhaps re-examine, refresh, cleanse, and expand terminologies, and avoid cliché, and finally, limitations. Perhaps Latour locates gaps in the way geopolitical analysis is carried out by the social scientists. Or is he alerting them to do further parsing of the zone to get a fuller understanding of it? The word parsing is specific to language, and he uses the zone as a composite syntax, zoning into the specific site. To clarify further, let me consider the two preliminary meanings of the word: an act of or result obtained by a parsing, a string, or a text. Analyze a sentence into its parts and describe their syntactic rules. This infinitive slicing is encouraged to enhance the research on the geo, parsing the zone. Thank you.
Now we will go on with one of the two observations that our students did. and Joshua Krüger was choosing the swimming pool, the IISc swimming pool, to do some ethnographic observations considering this technological natural artifact as a critical zone.
So we go on with our second table here. Just, okay, I think sound is too low. We need concentration on the human beings and their matters of concern about with you. Just might you begin and try also to interact and encounter, not only to speak about your matter of concern, but please say something.
If you make it like this, it's the most easiest, I hope.
Okay. So I have brought with me a fly called Drosophila melanogaster. This is found, I guess, all over the world. Some kind of Drosophila is always found, and we use it to study various things like genetics as well as how structures develop. They're very easy to grow in labs. They do not scare undergraduate students away. And we use them regularly.
Yeah, pass it on.
Hello, I'm Varun, and I'm a humanities student, and why I'm saying this is because the question of objects becomes a bit difficult when you enter humanities. I mean, like, there is no particular species that I study or particular object of study that I have. Rather than that, we have texts that we incorporate, we study. So, for example, I have, just to highlight the difficulty, I have a PDF called Dual Theories, Same but Different or Different but Same. It's a philosophy of science paper trying to articulate, trying to discuss whether the equivalent theories have different meanings or different meaning theories are equivalent. So why I just thought of highlighting this is because the object of study that we usually deal with are texts, human interactions and other things. And in that sense, it's very difficult to bring them and show it all, to display it in that sense. And interaction is always difficult. So yeah.
Hello everyone, I have here the rice moth larvae, which are Corsia cephalonica, the scientific name. So these are the larvae which we feed to the wasps and ants which we observe. So because in natural environment they have their own food and everything, but in the lab vesperi we prefer to feed them with this larvae. And
well, the object what I have brought here is myself, because I consider I am the end user in the network. Because I consider I am the end user and I should try to have a minimum impact and a balanced, sustainable environment. So that's my perspective.
Yes. Then perhaps try to interact, try something which is interesting or important on the thesis or objects or elements of the other. Yes.
Actually, he is the only one I have no idea how to interact.
Okay, so you can pass on to the microphone. Yes.
Yeah, but I think otherwise, the larvae, the flies, and human beings, how they are all interdependent in some way or the other. And yeah, I guess they're same and different, both.
Yeah. I would just say that I'm not, okay, the object of study that I have is not that different from any of this. Like say for example, he was telling at the beginning that, I didn't get your name. Srijoy was telling that how he bangs on the head of the larvae to feed it onto the caterpillars.
What wasps?
Wasps. So there's a kind of interaction that is happening with the object of study, and then you make some use of it, or some interaction. It's the same with the object of study of humanities in that sense. We have ethnographic studies, or like say for example, I interact with the PDF that I have in a very similar way that you guys would have interactions with your through microscope or any of those things. I underline, I do annotation, I delete the file, or probably I print it out. I mean, texts are not the only things, we study human interactions as well.
What I understand is try to learn from how the animals interact. Right now we are talking about invertebrates because there is a hierarchy of work getting done and they sustain well. And in his case, when we talk about feeding the organism, and ethical issue comes right now like banging the head, but his objective is that the organism is alive but it doesn't move. So in a perspective of humanity, whether it's right to do or not.
So just because you mentioned about this fact, but then we have to consider the thing like if we are like we considered the fact that we have to keep the other organisms alive as well. So we have to have a balance in between them. Like we can't, just because we are not want to bang their head, we can't starve our wasps as well. And one more thing, I just, because the two things are here, although they are different, but the thing, there is some cycle going on here, because we have this if you consider this larvae, there is this egg and then the larvae, and then it will finally develop into a moth or a fly, like just like the fly here. So there is a one, I can find one cycle which is going on. So one is being eaten by the other and the cycle continues like that. So this is something which I found.
Okay, so.
Okay, we go on now. Martin is going to summarize the first roundtable talks somehow with his blackboard writings.
Yes. Okay. The micro interferes with me. Yes, all the objects and all the talks interfere with each other or with us. And all the species interfere with each other, as we saw first in the movies. Yes, and this is, I don't want to summarize your talks, but to make some reflections, or as Karen Barat proposes, some deflections or diffractions. That means while reflecting something, you always tend to transform it a little bit. Yes, the speech or the voice transform it, the microphone transform it, and the room transform it. Yes, and also the blackboard is transforming. You know, perhaps this American philosopher Andy Clark, who speaks about extended mind. Extended mind means that when we have consciousness, when we reflect, we always use something else. A responding person, perhaps, or a diary, or a text, or an object. And as a diary or a computer, yes, we have many computer breakdowns, and this is something like our extended mind. Yes, and you are a user, but you are also an extended user. You have your wife, perhaps, or your clothes. Yes, and this is your extended mind and extended body a little bit. And also we use in what is called performative philosophy, or every philosophizing has some performative aspects, but you also can perform it a little bit more externally, yes, more explicitly, yes, bodily transformed, where whiteboard. And so we have this extended minds agents, which are called blackboards, diagrams, maybe even concepts may transform ourselves, theories may transform ourselves. Yes, we had some struggles of theories in these 14 days. We found some conflicts between perhaps what we observe, but perhaps wrong sides. The sea objects are very interesting. Yes, something like a Newtonian approach and something like a Darwinian approach, and perhaps something like an extended Darwinian discourse, perhaps going into systems theory, or perhaps going also into altruism, which is one of the very main and interesting topics of Raghavendra Gadakar. Yes, and what we are all perhaps necessarily want to deal with is some integrated approaches. Yes, we need perhaps some integrated approaches, as some of the speakers mentioned, to combine this natural science approach, the Darwinian approach concerning symbiosis, yes, with the sound and the grillen, no, I don't know the word, yes, okay. Yes, and You have to discuss all these approaches, and the discussion is going on in your teams, in your science at IISc, and in 5 to 10 minutes also in this third table talk. Thank you.
Okay, so we switch to theory and we switch also to our methodological approach. As we said in the beginning, one of our first theoretical reference was Michel Serre, and in this research that we are starting here at IISc will be Bruno Latour. So here you can read his idea about the critical zone, his concept, and it deals very much with the vulnerability of the Earth and of the living sphere, which is a very thin skin layer, which is around on the globe. Critical zone means a spot on the envelope of the biosphere, which extends vertically from the top of the lower atmosphere down to the so-called sterile rocks, and horizontally wherever it is possible to obtain reliable data on the various fluxes of ingredients flowing through the chosen site. So the word critical comes from the Greek name, which means divide, differentiate. It's very much about bifurcations, a concept that Michel Serre is also making very strong in his philosophy. And it's about zoning and positioning, and of course it's always a question of the point of view. So a geologist or an ecologist or a biologist is looking different on these aspects and also on these terms. So one point of view could be, that was during our field trip, looking at the Trout River in the critical zone observatory. So the critical zone always has also something ghost-like, as this picture might appear somehow ghost-like. And Michel Serre, who is very much related to Latour, he's the teacher of Latour.
Yeah, shortly
Yes,
accompany you.
Yes, yes, true.
The second meaning of the critical zone is also the vulnerability of the zone. Yes? Critical in the sense that an atomic reactor, if it gets critical, it explodes. And Latour is also concerned about the criticality of all biological, all human nature, culture systems. And he wants to ask us, or to please us, or to make us curious, also to integrate these matters of concern and cure into our relations and encounters.
Here is a quote by Michel Serre. You might have already read it. I read it again. We cannot claim to be subjects in the midst of a world of objects, for our behavior resembles that of either other insects, other rodents, or poisonous plants, not separated, but plunged, immersed in the biochea in cousin company. So it's very much about relatedness and about living together and forming something like a family. Donna Haraway says it in her words, I think our job is to make the Anthropocene as short, thin as possible and to cultivate with each other. So she's talking about companionship. And right now the earth is full of refugees, human and not, without refuge. We deal also with the term of spectrality, which is used by Timothy Morton. And as you can see, synonyms for the spectral are ghostly, shadowy, phantom, incorporeal, insubstantial, disembodied, unearthly, otherworldly. But criticality and zones are always always diffracting, as Barat is saying, processes and entities. They are unstable per se. Consequently, in our projects and thinkings, we work also with concepts, methods, and materialities of zoning and of criticalities than of critical zones alone. Critical zones are in a way spectrous, as Derrida and Morton call it, ghosty and often ambivalent. Reflection means representation, mirroring, cannot grasp all the relevant parts and entanglements because it and various meshworks intervene themselves into all ongoing processes. A meshwork, for instance, like we created here with the living wasps, the visual representation, the data line that we gain out of it, and the transmedial folding done by Ephraim here in the background. These are other proposals in order to deal with the term of network. As you know, Latour is dealing with the actor-network theory, that everything is an actor, not just humans, but objects. And Tim Ingold, an anthropologist, an English anthropologist, is criticizing the term of network and proposing the meshwork, since he says we have to concentrate on the relatedness more than on the relata, not on the knots, but on the kind of companionship, as Haraway would say, which is created now of the wasps being in here and our sensory experience of hearing the transmedial transformation. And you can overlay critically these, or spectral, in a spectral way, in a ghost-like way, these kind of entanglements, meshwork, network, like we did the folding of this room, which was a transformation. When we found it, it was looking like on the left, then we cleared it and we folded it to a kind of a performative space and experienced some ghost-like in-betweens. Our approach is very much influenced by binaries. You can criticize the binaries, but they can be helpful in order to find the third. Yeah, maybe the thing in between or the thing resulting out of it. So we strengthened some of the binaries that we were using here, reflecting, mirroring versus diffracting, simplifying versus complexifying. Normal scientists, natural scientists, needs to simplify in order to make observations which are of scientific use. What we are doing here is we complexify things, we over-complexify things. So we do not get hard facts out of it, not facts that can be reproduced in a way as well, since they are performative. This situation is unique and it will never occur again. Like you are here, you are participating, and something comes out of it. It may be bullshit, it may be valuable for your thought. Another binary, nature versus science versus art versus philosophy. Sciencing nature, like Subik did when he was painting the wasps. So the wasp transferred from a natural object to a scientific object which is delivering data through observation. Autopoiesis versus synpoiesis, human versus animal versus thing as a companion. Egoism versus altruism, you already had that. Local versus global versus mondial, termed by Nancy. So we are not trying to understand the whole Earth as a system, because we need to understand, or we understood within the last 50 years, that we have to subdivide it in multiple subsystems, and each scientist needs to subdivide his/her observations into subsystems in order to do this work into observations. Now, if you take this kind of meshwork together, this leads to our method again in order to summarize results of our artistic research, which we do through this mind map-like organized interactive web documentary. So, for instance, the work results from 4 years ago are documented in the web. So this looks now like a topological folding from this mind map towards an interaction design, interface design website that you can visit under parasite.metaspace.de. So this is another topological folding that you will also find downstairs in the garden. We will show you another first result in a little performance between Ephraim and me. Ephraim is doing the sounds, and I will show you some.
We come to 5:13.
reflections on medium and formal structure of the performance. Here, montage is not about a narrative, but non-narrative. And indeed, the more distance between images or sentences, the more it irritates the cognition, and hence the more its potential and possibility. Meaning is parsed, suspended, and converted to indelible impressions and memories. Fragments, perhaps we may look upon this performance as a dream where objects in the visual and sensory field remain unresolved. Tensions between the known and unknown. In dreams, we take responsibility, a postulation by Freud often forgotten by analysts and otherwise. Not by instruction, but by affects, to make sense and sense something repressed which is unknown to ourselves, or it is of and for the other. Rectangularity, the wood from the forest have been sacrificed and now haunt our domestic and institutional spaces. Despite critical inquiry, they are shaped into various rectangular objects, Cartesian in their form. Latour assembles the rectangularity by annotating the tables in the restaurant to the filing cabinets in the labs, archives, libraries, books, to papers where we take notes, and computer screens, to bring objects from the forest and elsewhere to be analyzed on a rectangular table and computer screen. Art too brings the film, painting, and photography to the Cartesian grid and locks them up within a framework with occasional scrambling here and there, or partly here in this dream installation, breaking the frame. Literature and poetry exist in tombs, well-bounded books. They are dioptric arts and a result of our eyes set as binocular vision. Roland Barthes. The story of the rectangularity continues further with Harun Farokhi. The brick as the fundamental design for architecture that predominantly divides space into rectangular shapes, enshrined once again in his work within the screen space. How do these boxes we create to live and operate influence our work and the questions that we ask? Why do we give more relevance to the work done on the table and in a box? Why should the forest come to the lab? Why is the image within the frame? On an optimistic note, music, sound is the art form that escapes the Cartesian grid. The Birth of the Clinic by Michel Foucault addresses the radical shift for research questions. Perspective arts preceded or was simultaneous to singular subject focus in research methods. Scientific objects and subject such as the lens and physics sharpened the perspective method during the Enlightenment. The questions changed from the premise that diseases existed outside and attacked the body, while around the 18th century the body is itself the site of disease. Therefore, seeing or the gaze took precedence, and the objects that multiplied therein, X-rays, stethoscopes, telescopes, binoculars, microscopes, periscopes, scopophilia as a result. The change in discourse mobilized modern machine. My short response to Pascal. An archaeology of knowledge unearths the a priori and discourses, or just simply assumptions that precede and preside silently behind questions and framework.
We take the question of Harun Farokhi and use it as a transition to the second movie done by Adrian. And since he likes to have to show his colors, I changed the screen about the rectangularity and the Cartesian observations of another critical zone. Continue with table talk 3, with the last table talk.
So, now you are starting to introducing what you brought with you and interacting to the other objects or thoughts.
Hello. Yes. So hello, I'm Saili, and I have this most powerful tool here. This is a paint box. And to begin any experiment, it's not possible to begin with any experiment without marking wasp or ant. So what we do in our lab is basically we work on wasp and ant. So we use these colors to mark them, we uniquely mark them. And for any person like from science background, like a researcher or a student, if he wants to start an experiment, it's very impossible to start an experiment because all these individuals, they look alike. So to differentiate between these one individual from another, it is very important to mark them and to mark them uniquely. So we use these tester paints to color them. So I think I'll pass it. Okay.
I have brought a very weird animal which is called as solifew. It's not a very well-known animal. It's an arachnid, which is a relative of a spider. It's not a real spider. The reason I brought here is 2 reasons. One, it represents that within science itself, there is a lot to explore because this is a taxon from India, which is not been worked out since probably last 1 century. The last documentation, taxonomic documentation, is by Pocock, which is 110 years back, and which shows my personal interest in its natural history as well.
Okay, I'm Jitu, and I have here a flower of cannonball tree, which is native to America and especially South America. But this is in a rare and endangered list. But this flower is very much close to me because it is somewhat religious. And in Kerala, we use this flower to worship. And this is having very good fragrance that I came to know after plucking it for displaying here.
Hello, I'm Katie. I got a butterfly here, and this is one of the insects which I study in museum. And if you think of butterflies, it plays multiple roles in the environment. As adults, it helps in pollination, and as larvae, it feeds on many kinds of trees and shrubs, leaves. And many of them are considered to be ecological sensitive animals.
Thank you so much. Now we've got 4 interesting people, 4 interesting objects, and how would you relate these objects to each other and your thoughts, which might be indexical, symbolic, iconic? Any ideas? How to draw lines?
Yeah, if you think of these butterflies, it visits flowers to feed on its nectar and pollen, and it helps in pollination in many cases. And it may not be as efficient as bees and wasps in pollination, but they also do helping in do pollination. And if you think of the insects which Abhijit has got, both of us are working on, this also belongs to the arthropod, phylum Arthropoda, and this belongs to a different order, this is belongs to a different group. And if you think of silage object, we can use paint in marking butterflies also if you want to identify them individually. We are doing some behavioral experiments.
Any other line that we can draw?
As I could see, there are 3 strict trophic levels. One that is a plant, on which probably a butterfly feeds, on which not directly, but then the solific that I brought is predominantly they are the predators. So they may, there are no studies, but I don't know, they might feed on the caterpillars of butterflies.
Sometimes it provides.
You may provide them if you want to purchase in the labs.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but how do I connect the paint with this? Probably Siley could say that.
Yeah, everything is colorful, so that is one thing. And I think we can come up with a small experiment with using these paints and these butterflies and
To paint them whether they attack.
yeah, something of that sort, I guess.
Okay. Thank you so much. Now, Professor Garaka, do you have some ideas how to relate the table? Okay, your object.
I didn't bring any object for the simple reason that I knew that I would find the object of my interest already here. I didn't have to bring it. All of you are the objects of my interest. I'm interested in human beings, but let me narrow that down. I'm not just interested in all human beings, I'm interested in human beings who observe objects. Let me narrow down that further. I'm interested in human beings who observe living objects. They may be dead, but they may have been living at one time, so I include now you may say, of course, the connection between a human being who's observing living objects and all the living objects that we talked about is obvious. It is not so obvious. It is much more complicated, and that's why I'm interested. So I'm interested in 2 levels. First is, who are the human beings who observe living objects? And here I want to make a distinction between human beings who are interested in living objects for utilitarian purposes. A farmer who grows crops, or a veterinary, or animal husbandry, people who grow animals, or people who exterminate animals. So these are utilitarian. I'm interested in non-utilitarian. Unfortunately, in the English language, there isn't a good language to put all non-utilitarian people in one basket. And those are the most interesting people. So who are the people who are interested? If you classify people who do quote unquote useless work, then there are three kinds. There are natural scientists, there are social scientists, and there is the humanities. In the humanities, I include the artists and the philosophers and everything else. Now, if you look at these three, the most disappointing group are the social scientists, because they really do not observe living objects. When they do, they restrict to one species out of 10 million species that are supposed to be present on Earth. So for me, they are hugely disappointing. The natural scientists are a little better, but not very good. First of all, only biologists really do this. And within biologists, an increasing fraction, which is quickly going to 100%, do not observe the organism, but observe some molecule inside the organism. And they quite foolishly call themselves molecular biologists. There's a friend of mine who is very fond of saying that molecular biology is an oxymoron, because molecules don't have life. So there is no such, there cannot be a molecular biology, you have to observe. So very disappointing still. The greatest hope is in the humanities and the artists. People who write prose, people who write poetry, people who paint, people who do photography, films, even people who do philosophy. They are the ones who I think really engage with what I think should be engaged. But anyway, if you take a few biologists, maybe one social scientist, and most of the people in the humanities, then there are two different ways in which, there are two different philosophies with which they observe. There is of course a continuum, but I like the binary idea. At one end, people say that I want to be outside the system. I am an external observer. I want to be external in every way, physically, visually, chemically, as well as intellectually. I want to be an outside objective, completely objective observer. At the other end, people say that it's part of me. I am part of the system, and with all the difficulties of observing parts of the system of which you're already a part, that's what they take. And I think this difference is not sufficiently appreciated, but it has profound implications, not only philosophically, but even for the future of life or the future of ourselves. And I think we should reflect a little bit more on these two different ways of observing, these two different philosophies of observing. And that's what I'm really interested in.
Thank you so much. There is no outside of the system anymore, because we are entangled and part of it. And Martin is now trying to summarize some of the blackboard, on his blackboard, some of these talks. Or
we ran a little bit out of time, and this is also a question which arises. Yes. Are we, as a species, human species, are other species, are theories also running out of time? Yes, this is a question of death and of life. Yes. And my favorite object was there, perhaps it is there. No, yes, no bite, yes. You know, Europeans fear mosquitoes. Yes, and this kills mosquitoes. And Michael Serre wrote beautiful sentences about killing and fighting against other species, or other species are helpful. Yes, they can termites a pest or not. Yes, and how do we handle all these very, very interesting and vulnerable, critical questions? And if you follow the theory of extended mind and extended phenotype, perhaps we meet all each other together in this world, which is an experiment of us, together with our companion species, with all your ants and your wasps and your bees, and all your relatives and wives and children and antecedents and your future offspring.
And your objects that you brought along. And so thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for hosting us and having us here. And you're all welcome to join the reception downstairs. Thank you.
say that the Center for Contemporary Studies has invited them in the past, has invited them now, and we'll be happy to invite them again. I must also confess that most of us really don't pretend to fully understand what you're doing, why you are doing. But what is special about the Center for Contemporary Studies is that we do not consider the unknown as uninteresting. Unfortunately, that's a big problem with most scientists and most intellectuals. If I don't understand it, it cannot be important. And we have the philosophy that if I don't understand it, then that's what I'm interested in. So that is unique about the Center for Contemporary Studies, and that's why we'll be happy to invite you again. And as a token of our appreciation for you and for memory of this visit, I'd like to give the team members a little memento. Daniel?
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Martin?
Yes. Thank you for your hospitality. Thank you very much indeed.
I don't. Yeah, please. Please. Would you like to come up and stay? Vasanti I know, so I'll call her last. I don't know the names of the other two.
Hello, and thank you. Thank you very much.
You can photograph yourself receiving it. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
And our own Vasanti Das.